Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're looking at Greenland, Denmark, and the U.S.
Hmm.
For more, you can check out Pal's Fundamentals on YouTube. And like always, the sources, those are linked below. Okay, so an article from nyheater.tv2.dk reports that Buddy Carter, as a Republican congressman, has introduced a bill.
Okay.
And this bill proposes authorizing President Trump to negotiate a purchase of Greenland from Denmark.
Huh. And there's an interesting detail. It suggests renaming Greenland to Red, White, and Blue Land.
Oh, wow. That's certainly striking.
It is. It reminds me of when the Trump administration renamed the Gulf of Mexico to
Oh,
the American Gulf, but only on Google Maps and only for users in the U.S.
really?
Yeah. It's kind of a reminder of how symbolic changes like these can be
Right.
and how their impact might vary depending on who's viewing them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of impacts, there's been a reaction from South Korea's trade minister concerning the planned tariffs on steel.
Right.
The minister believes these tariffs could lead to a decrease in the demand for American steel.
That makes sense. South Korea is exploring new markets for its steel production, especially since they were the fourth largest exporter of steel to the U.S.
Interesting. And what about Denmark? A Danish economist was quoted saying that they don't anticipate any immediate consequences for Danish or European companies from these tariffs on steel and aluminum.
Yeah, well, that's because the majority of the steel and aluminum the U.S. imports comes from its neighboring countries.
Oh, okay.
So the economist also doesn't expect a significant change in market prices,
Yeah.
because the overall demand is predicted to stay pretty much the same.
Now let's turn our attention to the discussion surrounding Greenland's potential independence,
Mm-hmm.
specifically within Greenland's political landscape.
Yeah.
So there's a Greenlandic independence party called Nalarak. They're pushing for a quick vote on Greenlandic independence and the establishment of a state.
Right.
There's a specific element of their proposal that's caused some debate. Their leader, Paleo Broberg, believes that only Greenlanders with Inuit heritage should be allowed to vote in any future referendum on state formation.
Oh, okay.
So what's the reasoning behind that stance?
Well, Broberg says that individuals of Danish descent, even if they've always lived in Greenland, shouldn't have voting rights in this context
Okay.
because they're part of the Danish people, not the Greenlandic people.
That's a dividing line, and there's some opposition to that.
Mm-hmm.
Aluja Chemnitz, he's a Greenlandic member of parliament, used this proposal as discriminatory. She believes everyone who contributes to Greenlandic society should have the right to participate in such a crucial democratic process.
Yeah.
Chemnitz has also expressed concern that this kind of rhetoric will lead to more people emigrating from Greenland,
Right.
which would further complicate this already sensitive situation. Adding another layer to this, Aki Matilda Huddam, she's a member of parliament who recently joined Nalarak, believes there should be criteria to determine who belongs to the Greenlandic people. This clearly shows that the debate is far from settled.
Yeah. It seems like this is really forcing people to think about what Greenlandic identity really means.
Yeah, it's a great example of how political decisions so often end up tied to personal questions of where
Yeah.
you belong and cultural heritage. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what are the viewpoints from Denmark regarding Greenland's potential independence?
Well, an opinion piece from bt.dk argues that Denmark should actually take the initiative and end its relationship with Greenland.
Whoa, that's a big step to take. What's leading them to that conclusion?
Well, the author uses this analogy of a troubled romantic relationship.
Okay.
They say Greenland wants to leave but is waiting for financial stability before actually doing so.
So they're being led on.
Yeah, they're saying that Greenland is slandering Denmark and flirting with the rich neighbor, referring to the U.S., of course.
Wow.
And they argue that Denmark should take control and end the relationship before Greenland's independence, which they think is inevitable, ends badly for Greenland.
Huh. So what are their specific concerns about how this could go wrong for Greenland?
Well, they argue that Greenland just doesn't have what it takes to be financially self-sufficient or to handle their own military defense, and they don't have the resources to address social challenges like low education levels and substance abuse.
And they bring the U.S. into this, too.
Yeah, they claim that the U.S. is only interested in Greenland for strategic positioning and resources, and they compare it to times when the U.S. has, taken advantage of its partners.
Very interesting.
Now, going back to this debate about the proposed Inuit registry, it's causing a lot of tension.
Yeah, it's got to be concerning to see this type of rhetoric gaining traction.
Absolutely. Aja Chemnitz, who we talked about earlier, she's publicly expressed her anger and sadness over this proposal in an interview with TV2.
Right.
She believes it will divide Greenland and really hurt it in the long run.
She's also worried about the impact on immigration, right?
Yeah, exactly.
She's afraid that this push for exclusivity will just worsen the already significant immigration from Greenland.
Right. People might feel unwelcome or unsure about their future if they don't even know if they have the right to help shape it.
Yeah.
She also has logistical concerns, like how would they even determine Inuit background? And what about people with mixed heritage or Greenlanders born and raised outside of Greenland?
That sounds really hard to figure out fairly.
It is.
But it seems those who support the registry have their own reasoning.
They do. Aki Matilda Hagam, the parliament member who recently joined Nalarak, she thinks a clear definition of who belongs to the Greenlandic people is necessary.
So she's making a distinction between living in Greenland and being a member of the Greenlandic people.
Yeah, and for her, this difference is all about things like ancestry, language, cultural connection, and self-identification. She's even compared it to how Canada recognizes its indigenous populations.
So she's suggesting a system where people would apply to be recognized as Inuit based on a mix of, like, objective and subjective criteria.
Exactly. She suggested that descendants of Inuit would have, primary rights to recognition, with others potentially able to apply later.
Wow, this really shows how complex it is to define what it means to be Greenlandic.
It really does. It comes down to this question of who gets to define a nation's identity.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Paley Broberg, the leader of Nalarak, insists that his party's proposal is based on the existing Self-Government Act and the definition of a people in international law.
So he's saying he's not making up these criteria, he's just interpreting what's already there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He points to how the Self-Government Act describes a people as a group with distinct characteristics based on things like language, history, ethnicity, and culture.
Okay.
And even though he's of mixed Danish and Greenlandic heritage himself, he strongly identifies as Greenlandic.
So does that mean self-identification should be more important in determining belonging, even within a legal framework?
It's a tough question. There are no easy answers.
Yeah.
The debate in Greenland is a reflection of these bigger conversations happening around the world about national identity, indigenous rights, and how we understand belonging in a world that's so connected.
It highlights how political discussions are often intertwined with personal stories and cultural heritage.
Yeah.
And really get to the heart of what it means to be part of a community.
Absolutely. And as Greenland moves towards potential independence, these questions of identity will continue to shape its future both within its own borders and on the global stage.
Yeah, this has been a really fascinating look into a very complex situation with a lot of implications.
Yeah, as we've seen, these discussions about Greenland's future are bringing up some pretty fundamental questions about national identity, self-determination, and what it actually means to belong to a place.
It's really interesting how these debates within Greenland are kind of echoing similar conversations happening all over the world.
Huh. Exactly. There's this global resurgence of discussions around indigenous rights, the impact of colonialism, and how national identity is changing in our increasingly interconnected world.
And as we've seen today, these aren't just abstract debates, They have real consequences for people's lives, their sense of belonging, and their ability to shape their own futures.
Absolutely. And as Greenland figures out its path forward, it's going to be fascinating to see how these internal debates ultimately shape its direction, both domestically and on the world stage.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Well, that wraps up our look at Greenland, Denmark, and the U.S. Thanks for joining us.